Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Do you need a guitar?
Yeah, would be good. Next time. Hmm? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Chana Vallabha Kunja Bihari Yasoda Nandana Brajachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Vrajachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajachana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare So, Hare Krishna. I would like to thank everyone for coming this evening. So, let's start with the mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading tonight from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 3, entitled Karma Yoga. And the verse reading tonight is 342. Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhya param manaha Manasastu para buddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha. Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhya param manaha Manasastu para buddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha. Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhya param manaha Manasastu para buddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha. Bruce? Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhya param manaha Manasastu para buddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha. Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhya param manaha Manasastu para buddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha. Indriyani paranyahur Indriyebhya param manaha Manasastu para buddhir Yo buddhe paratastu saha. So let's do the word for word. Indriyani, senses. Senses. Parani, superior. Ahu, are said. Indriyebhya, more than the senses. Param, superior. Mana, the mind. Manasaha, more than the mind. Tu, also. Para, superior. Buddhi, intelligence, Yaha, who, Buddhehe, more than the intelligence, Bharataha, superior, to, but, Saha, he. So let's go to the translation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Okay. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. So please repeat after me. The working senses are superior to dull matter.
Working senses are superior to dull matter.
Mind is higher than the senses.
Mind is higher than the senses.
Intelligence is still higher than the mind.
Intelligence is still higher than the mind.
And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence.
And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Gadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Zahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Chakatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Prananami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Darubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Shesha Junivari Bhashatade Shatayane. Okay. So before we start with the class, I would like to ask for your blessings so I can speak something of value, and that hopefully I will also learn something from this class, because I'm literally preaching to myself. And also would like to thank our senior devotee for being present tonight. Haribol. Okay. So let me start this class with sharing a personal story from my life. I'll just read the purport quickly again. Oh, the purport. Purport. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions, as described here, ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the function of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act, as it does during dreaming. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there's a similar passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If, therefore, the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance that the sense will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param drishtva nivartat. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the Great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of the senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness, by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of the intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind. Okay. So, yes, let me start this class with sharing a personal story from my life. In 2016, I was struggling with a very severe addiction, and I just wasn't able to break free from it. Many people told me that I just wasn't the same person anymore, and they just couldn't recognize me anymore. I knew that I was harming myself and I was sacrificing my well-being, but I just didn't care. Whatever I tried, I just kept coming back to it. If I would have known that I would have hurt people which I love in my life, I would have never ever started watching Netflix. So let me ask you a question. Has anyone here failed in the last week with controlling their mind or their senses? Please raise your hands. Has anyone failed here in the last week with controlling their mind or their senses? Please raise their hands. Okay, nice. How about in the last 3 days? Okay. And how about today? Okay, nice. I think you're in the right class then. So in the verse 522 in the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Yehi samsparshacha boga dukkayonaya evate adyantavanta konteya nate shuramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. So what makes people addicted to such things as watching Netflix, gambling, smoking, drinking? Why do people engage in sense gratification? As a spirit soul, we all carry the innate craving for love and happiness. But because we're parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, we also have the tendency of wanting to be the controller. This nature directs our intelligence and our mind and senses to look for fulfillment in the material world. And so when the material senses come in contact with the material sense objects, naturally lust develops. From there on, we engage our mind and intelligence in gratifying our senses. By practicing this behavior again and again, over time we start to associate feeling better with this addictive behavior. Since nothing in the material world can give us long-lasting satisfaction, and definitely cannot satisfy our soul, the rewarding feeling diminishes over time. But instead of doing less of it, we actually start doing more of it to get the same intense rewarding feelings. When we're addicted, we construct a whole explanation in our mind about how the behavior makes us feel better. We come to believe that this behavior is the key to feeling better, and regardless of it, how it actually makes us feel and the negative consequences of it. This can lead to anger and illusion if we can't satisfy our cravings, which is really nicely stated in the fall-down verses 262 and 263 in the Bhagavad Gita. Srinivas Prabhu gave a class in verse 340 in the Bhagavad Gita 2 days ago, and it's really nicely explained in the purport there. The mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, and thus when we hear about sense objects, the mind generally becomes the reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification, and as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next-door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter. And thus, with the mind and senses, the spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. There are many stories in the Shastras which show us how contemplation can lead to fall down. A good example would be Sabari Muni. Can anyone explain how Sabari Muni fell down? Yes? Yes.
Something to do with the fishes. While he was meditating in like the ocean or the sea, he saw two fishes in the Yamuna. He saw two fishes mating, and he broke out of his meditation. Got distracted.
Yes, thank you. Very nicely explained. I think also two really important points in this story is that after he went out from the river and asked King Mandata to marry one of his daughters, Mandata. From there on, he started to engage himself in sense gratification, but he just wasn't satisfied. So he actually came back to performing austerities and devotional service. And from there, we can really learn that contemplation is the cause of fall down. It's all started with contemplation. So the Upanishads say there's a chariot which has 5 horses pulling it. The horses have reins inside their mouths, which are in the hands of a charioteer. A passenger is sitting in the back of the chariot. Yeah. Ideally, the passengers should instruct the charioteer, who should then control the reins and guide the horses in the proper direction. However, in this case, the passenger has lost control of the reins, and so the horses are directing the chariot. In this well-known analogy, the chariot is the physical body. The 5 horses each represent one of our senses: sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. The reins symbolize the mind. Our mind is connected to the senses and can drive our senses. The charioteer represents the intellect, and the passenger seated behind is the soul residing in the body. Krishna is represented as the super soul or the inner witness. So the senses, the horses, desire pleasurable things. The mind, the reins, is not exercising restraint on the senses. The intellect, the charioteer, submits to the pull of the reins, the mind. So in the materially bound state, the bewildered soul does not direct the intellect in the proper direction. Thus the senses decide the direction where the chariot will go. The soul, the passenger, experience the pleasure of the senses, but these do not satisfy it. However, if the soul wakes up to its higher nature and decides to take a proactive role, it can lead the intellect in the proper direction. The intellect will then govern the lower self, the mind and the senses, and the chariot will move in the desired direction. In this way, the higher self, the soul, must be used to control the lower self, namely the mind, the intellect, and the senses. So how can we take the reins back in our hands and steer our chariot in the right direction when one of those elements are pulling us in a different one? So the super soul, or Krishna, sees our endeavor, and by his mercy and sanctioning can lead us back to our true eternal position. In the purport, Prabhupada mentions that by complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the mind automatically becomes stronger too. The soul, our true nature is Satchit Ananda, eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. We have to understand that only by loss of being connected to Krishna, we start to identify ourselves with our false ego and forget our true identity. The intelligence, by understanding the constitutional position of our soul and not identifying ourselves with our false ego, we can re-establish our connection to Krishna. With our intelligence, we can then stop detrimental contemplation and shift to more beneficial contemplation. The mind. In the purport, Prabhupada mentions that the mind is superior to the sense objects. Therefore, with our intelligence, we can choose to which thoughts in our mind we're going to pay attention to and which ones we're going to neglect. The senses and sense objects. In the purport, Prabhupada mentions that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses. The senses are always active, and we can't turn them off. But what we can do is we can curb them. In the analogy, the senses were represented as horses. So how can we avoid a horse from getting distracted? Have you ever noticed that horses which draw chariots or run a race oftentimes wear something which is called blinders? Horses wear blinders to reduce their field of vision and stay focused on their task. When pulling wagons in cities, horses need blinders to keep their attention focused straight ahead and to block out the distractions around them. In a similar way, the devotees have their own blinders, which come in the form of rules and the 4 regulative principles. In the purport of verse 3:15-45 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that yoga practice necessitates controlling the senses, and the beginning of sense control is to control the tongue. One who can control the tongue can also have control over the other senses. So one practical way to become more controlled over our tongue is practicing austerity of speech. For example, we could try for one day to only speak words which are truthful, beneficial, pleasing, and not agitating to others, and also regularly reciting Vedic literatures. Another way could be to reduce the cravings of our tongue by becoming more aware when we eat and just eat enough to keep our body and soul together. So now we might be thinking, okay, I get it. We have to control the horses, aka the senses. But when and how should we do this? If we take a look at the hierarchy and consider everything, we'll find that ultimately the mind acts as a mediator between the two parties. Either we take a step towards our senses and sense gratification, and thus consolidate our identification with the false ego, or we take a step towards our intelligence and the soul to start remembering our constitutional position as parts and parcels of Krishna and that we are his servants. So the verse 11:23-42 of the Srimad Bhagavatam says, "These people are not the cause of my happiness and distress. Neither are the demigods, my own body, the planets, my past work or time. Rather, it is the mind alone that causes happiness and distress and perpetuates the rotation of material life." This means that an agitated mind is the root cause of this vicious cycle. So we need spiritualized intelligence which is looking through the eyes of Shastras, to engage our mind in Krishna's service and not to become servants to our minds. We can build up our spiritual intelligence by associating and hearing from the devotees, reading the books, chanting, honoring prasadam, engaging in devotional service. So if you ever heard the saying, your thoughts lead to your feelings, which lead to your actions, which leads to your results, then you can understand how our minds work. The results we then achieve reinforce our initial thoughts, and it becomes a chain reaction. After proving ourselves right over and over again, our thoughts then become beliefs, and those beliefs become habits that drive our behavior. So we have to step out of this cycle by choosing a different action and to change our thoughts. So I would like to invite you to try out something different tomorrow. So the next time a thought arises which you don't like, try out these 3 steps. Step 1, analyze the thought. Accept the thought. Don't contemplate about it or try to forcefully stop it, because it's not possible. Ask yourself, is this thought true? Does the thought come from your false ego due to sense gratification? And is this thought absolutely true? Meaning, is it true all the time? Step 2, break the thought down. How do you feel when you have this thought? Is this thought bringing you closer to Krishna? And who would you be without this thought? Would not having this thought bring you closer to Krishna? Step number 3, change the thought. If it is a negative thought, turn it into the opposite and find examples to validate its truth. If it is a greedy, lusty, or angry thought, realize that you are too much identified with your senses and you need to build stronger connection with Krishna again. Try to dovetail the positive aspects of greed, lust, and anger and turn it into a positive statement. Something I can do right now that will bring me closer to Krishna. Because physical actions naturally change the state of our minds too. In one of his lectures, Prabhupada said, "The desire does not have to be cut or stopped. It has to be purified. That's all." So just remember ABC: analyze, break down, change. If you practice this cycle long enough, you can replace your thought and become more conscious of Krishna. So since we have a little bit more time, for the end, let me also cite this verse. It's the verse 1:12 in Nectar of Devotion. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchyate. Translation. Bhakti, or devotional service, means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service unto the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and simply by being employed in the service of the Lord, one's senses are purified. So I want to thank you very much for your time, and I also would like to apologize for any mistakes or offenses which I might have caused. And I would like to open up for questions, comments, and I also really would appreciate any feedback on how I can improve.
Thank you for your class, Prabhu. It's not a question. I just wanted to say I really liked your point about how the horses are our senses, and horses, like race horses, use blinders to stay focused and so you don't get distracted, and we have blinders as well in our practice, and our blinders are the 4 regs and the rules and regulations. So yeah, I really appreciate that point. Thank you.
Sorry, is it working? It is working.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Hare Krishna, it's working, right?
Hare Krishna.
So, how did you come in touch with devotees?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, that's quite a long story. So how I, like, with Krishna consciousness or devotees, like, or both? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I was always very inquisitive about many things in life, and I also came to points where I really was thinking, there has to be a deeper meaning to life and to many things which happen in our life. And yeah, from there on I was really like on a search for answers. And I tried out different things, did different retreats, meditations, also checked out Buddhism. But one thing which really stuck with me was when I came upon a video of Radhanath Maharaj. And what really I was really intrigued by his way of his presence, like how he presents himself, how he behaves. And from there on, I watched many videos of him, and also from other devotees. And I just saw like this thread that like all the devotees have like this drive, which come like in a loving way, and that they're always like very ambitious to grow and to work on themselves, to be of service to other people. And still, they remain completely humble. And that was really intriguing to me. And from there on, I was looking up Krishna consciousness. And then from there on, I came to the temple in Zurich and met other lovely devotees. Yeah. And one thing led to another. And now I'm here.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your class. I also really like this analogy of the cart and the horses, and how you drew this spectrum, the scale from there's the senses, and then there's the soul, and in between is the mind, and the mind is kind of the mediator, goes either to this side or that side. And I just wanted to ask you, in your personal experience, how would you say how do we actually experience that we are a soul? How can we actually experience that? Do you have any experience, or how do you try to get there?
I think I can just keep my thoughts. Maybe the seniors can elaborate on that. I feel like in order to feel our true identity as soul, we have to really start detaching from the body first, because that's really what kind of holds us. And also, I feel like it's a lot of conditioning from like multiple lifetimes and like from many years in this life. And I think it really just takes first detaching from the body before we can get a glimpse of like our true nature. And obviously it can be difficult, but I think sometimes devotees get glimpses, if either in kirtan or when they're really inspired. But also I would say the association definitely helps, because for me personally, what inspires me really a lot is just seeing the senior devotees and like really seeing them, like you can tell there's something behind this. They have like, well, they are blissful and full of knowledge. So yeah, but maybe one of the seniors would like to elaborate, or.
Hare Krishna. Well, connecting to Krishna, you automatically understand you're not the body. It's easier. Whereas those who try and do it separately from that, it takes a longer time to achieve perfection. And the perfection they achieve is just to enter the Brahman. So it's easier to just connect to Krishna. Understanding you're not the body becomes easy automatically. Because you get the higher taste. You're getting the higher taste, and then you're not identifying with the body so much. Even though you may be on the sensual platform, because you're getting the higher taste, that sensual platform will not affect you.
Yeah. And in order to achieve that, I guess it's also like associating with devotees, hearing, chanting. Yeah.
Okay. Prabhupada said that if you associate with devotees, you become a devotee. If you associate with drunkards, you become a drunkard. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. Any other questions? Comments, critics?
Okay. I think I have a question. I think this will turn into a question because I've just been thinking about it. So the point in the purport is saying, if the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, then there is no chance of it being engaged in lower propensities. So like, I guess one thing like, for me, like last week, I think just reflecting now on like recently, like this really hits me now because I feel like, there was a week where like I was just really battling with my mind. But then I just spent a day just like, there was like a special day and I was like, let me just serve some devotees, and I was just engaged in just like service throughout the whole day. And I noticed that like all these problems which I thought I have, it all just sort of went away when I was just engaging in sort of direct service. And so like I feel like it's it really hits me, and I feel like it's so true that what Prabhupada is saying here. But then I guess it's making me think now like, but we're not always 24/7 directly engaging in service. Like with that example I was giving I was helping out in the kitchen and I was serving and I was doing all these kind of things, and naturally my mind was just focused on sort of serving and engaging in service. But that we might be doing sort of other activities, let's say going for a run or whatever, sleeping or whatever other activities, right? But then our mind might start engaging in like lower propensities again. So like what do you think sort of that kind of means? Is it like that we 24/7 need to be engaged in something directly, or is it like on a more subtle sort of level, kind of, if you understand what I'm saying?
It's a good question. I'd say maybe just for the first part which you mentioned, thank you for sharing your reflection. Yeah, also like what I shared before about like changing the thoughts. I tried that out for the last couple of days, and it kind of really helped me a lot, because it's every time like I feel like my thoughts, like I have negative thoughts or thoughts which I don't really like, I go through this process, and then I see, okay, yeah, I've lost the connection to Krishna, and I need to build it again. And then also, like I mentioned in the end, I look for something which I can do right now to be back engaged again, and also to use my like anger or frustration or whatever, and try to use it in a positive way. And so in those moments when I feel like, okay, I lost the connection, I try to build again with something I can do right now. Now, obviously, there are situations where we can't do some service, or we are engaged with something else. And I'd say, I mean, it's difficult it's definitely a process, but we should just try to always know why we're doing something. And ultimately, it's always for Krishna's pleasure, or to be able to serve Krishna better. So if we go for a run, we do it for our physical health, to be able to serve better. If we sleep, if we try to get sleep, we do it to be of better service the next day. Try to sleep. Yeah, so it's definitely a process. And I was asking some senior devotees if we should try to always kind of like forcefully think that, okay, I'm doing this for Krishna. I think it's something which will naturally come over time, but it's definitely also beneficial to always be aware why we're doing things. Because I only think when we're don't know why we're doing it, like our mind starts to wander around. So I hope that helps. Okay. Okay. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki. Srila Prabhupada ki.
His Grace Roman Prabhu ki Jai.
Ki Jai. Really well structured.